Welcome to my channel. This is Lizette from Crochet Designs, and we're gonna make this adorable wreath bracelet. And if you want to be a little extra, you can make the headband too, and that will be linked below. And you can match it with your bracelet and act like you're checking the time, even though you know it's not a watch. Yeah, so here we go. I'll stop now. There are very few supplies you'll need. You'll need a 3.5mm hook, some scissors, a yarn needle, a button that is about 1/2 inch wide, and preferably with big holes in it, because then you can use this needle to fit through and you don't have to go and get a regular sewing needle, which is sharper and just another supply you'll need. And you can also use the same yarn that you use to make the bracelet for the button, so it's just another way to keep it matching instead of having to now go find thread to go with a different needle. But if your button does have tiny holes in it, perfectly fine, just get a needle and thread to match. And of course, some yarn, size 4 worsted weight. If you follow my pattern with no adjustments, your bracelet will end up about 7 inches long and about 1.5 wide. It's going to vary just because of, these things moving around and not laying perfectly flat, which is kind of what you want. I'd say I have a pretty average wrist. I mean, I fit in most bracelets that you buy in a store, so just to give you an idea of if you need to adjust it or not. You're going to start off doing a foundation chain, and it is not the same as a regular chain. There's a reason why I chose to use that for this pattern. It's not as tight, so when you do one row with a regular chain and then you go to your regular, let's say single crochet, whatever the next row is, you'll probably notice it's a little tighter than all of your other rows. The foundation chain is going to have a lot more stretch to it. I do have a video linked below on how to do the foundation chain, so I'm not going to go into detail here. If you haven't learned it, just click on that real quick and come right back. But we are going to do 36 foundation chains. Now this length 36 is going to give you the size that I made, which is the 7-inch bracelet at the end. So if a 7-inch bracelet is not going to work for you, this is where you're going to make your adjustment on size. So you're going to make this either shorter or longer, and I will show you where your adjustments will affect the pattern, and it's really not a big deal as we go. So basically make this long enough to go around your wrist and for the ends to touch. So you want it so that your chain that we're doing right now just touches and does not overlap. All right, so as you can see, it's got a lot more stretchiness than a regular chain. It's also a little thicker, because the way we're going to do the other rows, we need something thicker to be able to go around like that. So that is a foundation chain. So at this point, you should check your wrists that you're planning to wear this on, and your goal is for it to just be close to touching the ends. Okay, so you can see it's not tight on my wrist, but it's not super loose, and my ends touch like that. Then, once that's been established, you want to take out 3. And the reason we're taking out 3 is as we go, and if you've made anything like this before, it will get a little bit longer as we add in stitches into it. So the second row, the third row, it's going to make this expand a little bit, and taking out 3 makes the finished size the size that we want it to be. So we're taking out 3. There's 1, 2, and 3. And so now you should have 33 stitches on your foundation chain. And this should measure about 6.5 inches long now after taking those 3 out. So you see, I'm pretty close to 6.5 right there, and that's where you want to be when you get to this point. So this is considered row 1. For rows 2 and 3, you're going to do the same exact thing for those, you're going to chain 1, turn your work, and 1 single crochet into each chain all the way across. Alright, it should look like this now after row 3. And next you will not fasten off, do not cut your yarn. We are going to make the button loop. So what you're looking at here is this rectangle piece here, and you can see that there is a button loop that I made here on the end. The buttons that I used are about 1/2 inch wide, and the length of that chain that I made that will go around that tight enough and not too tight is 5. So right from where we left off, we're going to chain 5, and then we're going to slip stitch it down in the opposite corner, which is here, and it's actually the last single crochet of row 1. So we started row 1 here, we went all the way down, so we're going to slip stitch it into that last one there. So here's our chain 5. We're going to turn it this way like that, and in the first V that you see at the top, we're going to slip stitch into that, and then you made the loop. Okay, next we're going to start what I call the leaves of the wreath, which are basically these little curly things. Okay, so we just finished making our buttonhole with the slip stitch. We're going to chain 1, then we're going to slip stitch around the chain 1, which is actually the end of row 1. So here's where we started. It's our slip knot tail end, row 1, and at the end of row 1 there is a chain 1. So basically the first thing you can get your hook around in that row right there. Okay, so again, here's our loop. We're going to bring our hook from behind like this, and we're going to slip stitch through that, and then we're going to chain 8. And this is how each curl will start. We're going to start in the second chain from the hook, so there's 1 and 2. So starting in the second one, we're going to single crochet in all 7 chains down because we skipped that first one. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you have 1 more left right there, and it should start to curl on its own. See how it's already curling? If it doesn't, you can kind of make it curl with your hand. If that doesn't work, you're not doing your chain, the chain 8, and you're not, or single crochets tight enough, so just pull a little bit harder. Okay, so we just did our first curl, and then we're going to slip stitch around the next 2 stitches. So remember, we went around that beginning one. To tell where you are, you can kind of pull, and then you can see that you already went around this. You're going to go right in here to go around the next one and slip stitch around that. And it says 2 times, so we're going to do another. So again, we already went around that. We're going to go around the next one. Okay, so here's the V's at the top. We're not going through the normal spot. We're going around basically like the post, sort of like a front post double crochet if you know how to do that. But basically what I'm doing here, just going behind it. So here's our second slip stitch. And then here's another curl. We're going to chain 8. Skip the first one, starting in the second one. Single crochet down, which is 7 because we skipped 1. and it started to curl just like the other one, and 2 slip stitches around the next 2. So this is where our curl is. I'm going to go in around behind the next one, 1 slip stitch, do it again around the next one, and start our third one. So we have 2, chain 8, 7 single crochets, skipping the first chain, and the 2 slip stitches around the next 2. You're going to repeat that all the way until the very end of this row. So just to show you what it's looking like so far, we've got 3 curls here. Here's our bracelet base. We're going to do the chain 8, 7 single crochet, 2 slip stitch, chain 8, 2 slip stitch, all the way down to the end. You should have at the end of the row 17 of these. Okay, at this point you just repeated the curl 15 more times, so you have 16 altogether. Okay, the first one that you did for this row, and then it had the pattern has your repeat. You should be with 1 more stitch left on this row. So this was that last curl. You did your 2 slip stitches. You're going to do a chain 8 again and do your normal 7 single crochets like you did repeatedly. And then instead of the 2 slip stitches that we've normally been doing for all of these, you're going to do 1 slip stitch around the last stitch on the row. So here's that slip knot from the beginning, and you have 1 little gap of space here to insert your hook, and do that last slip stitch at the end. And now altogether you have 17 of these curls. Now let's say you adjusted the length at the beginning when we did the first foundation chain. You might have 2 here left, so just go ahead and slip stitch around 1 or 2, however many are left there at the end. For the next row of curls, you're going to turn your work like this, and you're going to slip stitch around the chain from row 2. Here is row 2, and this is row 3. So you're going to go around that chain space right there. Okay, so again, we turned it this way, and look for that first space in the middle row there that you can insert your hook, and slip stitch that. And then again, slip stitch around the next single crochet, which is right next to that. And we're going to repeat that same pattern of doing a chain 8, 7 single crochets, skipping that first single crochet, and slip stitch around the next 2 stitches. So we last went around this one, so we're going to go in the next space and do that twice. So there's 1, and then the next one. Okay, and then do your chain 8 again, and you're just going to keep on going, inserting your hook into these openings for that second row all the way down. Alright, we're towards the end of the second row of curls, and we just did this 16th one, and that means we ended with 2 slip stitches after. So there's a 16th curl, and we've got 1, 2 slip stitches, which was the very last stitch of this row. Here's that button loop, and we went around the very end there. So we're going to end this with 1 last curl. So chain 8, 7 single crochet. So this row ends just like that, without our last curl, you know, like anchored down by the slip stitches, because in the row 3 you're going to turn it. Okay, so it's this way, we're going to turn it this way. So we have our button loop to our right. And when we continue with the next row, we will start off by doing a slip stitch around the first 2 single crochet, which is this last row here. Okay, so here's the button loop. You put your hook through there to get around the first one. Okay, so again, we have that last curl on our hook, not slip stitched down yet. We have our button loop here, we have our last row here, we're going to do our curls in, coming in from this way, and just like that. So our 2 slip stitches to get us started. And then you go ahead with your chain 8, and just like the other row, we're going to do all the way down to the end. And again, in this row, you know, it might look a little like there's less space, but you know, you're going in, once we finish this one, you're gonna go right in there just like that, just like we kept doing. Here's the next one, and then the next one would be here. You know, you just keep on going around that single crochet with the V's are going to be on top. Okay, the next step is to fasten off. I already cut my yarn, so go ahead and cut the tail end. And fasten off just means doing a slip stitch basically. Okay, so the next step is the button, and you're gonna have your loop end on one end, and then you should have 2 tail ends. This is one that you started with at the beginning of the pattern and one that you just fastened off at the end. And what I like about using this to sew the button on instead of cutting a separate piece is that it's actually connected to the entire piece, so it just feels more secure to me. So you're going to flip it over on the front side and just sort of find a little gap of space here. So I'm going to sew mine on close to the edge like that. So I'm sort of just moving some curls out of the way, and I'm going to sew that on right there. I'm going to use these 2 pieces of yarn to do that. Okay, so now on the back I have the piece of yarn that I used to go through the button and my other piece from the beginning. I'm just going to tie them together to help secure it about 2 or 3 times. And then I'm going to thread them both onto the needle. And I'm just going to weave that in on the back side, so nobody will see this. And I'm just going through a layer of these stitches back here, and about that far should be good enough. If you're worried about this unraveling, you can cut this and then add a tiny little dab of fabric glue right there on the end, and it's washable with fabric glue, so and it can get wet, so I wouldn't be worried about that. And then we're going to do the same with this other tail end. So now we have our button sewn on the opposite end of the loop. So you should be able to loop that on like that. And next we're going to do the bow. For the bow, we're going to use red yarn and the same 3.5mm hook. So start with 5 chains, so chain 5. And we're going to make 4 triple crochet into the first chain. So if you've never done a triple crochet, you just wrap around your hook twice. So 1, 2. It's similar to a double crochet, but go around twice. And then we're going to insert our hook in the 5th chain from the hook. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's the first chain basically. Alright, and just like a double crochet, you only pull through 2. but you're gonna do it 3 times instead of just 2 times. So that's 1 triple crochet, and we need 4 of them. So that's 1, here's another, and it's all into the same spot. So that's 2, back into the same stitch. That's 3, back into the same stitch. Okay, so you can see that was our chain at the beginning, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we will chain 4, and then we're going to slip stitch into the same stitch that everything else is in. So right back into there, slip stitch, and now we made the first half of the bow. Okay, so for the other half of the bow, we're going to start with a chain 4 right where we left off, and just like the other side, we're going to do 4 triple crochet back into that center stitch. So right back in there like everything else. So 4 triples. Okay, looks like that now, and we're going to do another chain 4, slip stitch back into the middle just like the other side, and this is the main part of the bow now. Okay, so next we're going to do these little tails of the bow, and we are not going to make them separately and sew them on. You are not going to cut your yarn. We ended off here with the slip stitch in the center, and you will not fasten off. Okay, so just straight from here, we're going to chain 9. Okay, so there's our chain 9. Starting in the second chain, we're going to slip stitch into 2 chains. So skipping the first right into the second, we're going to slip stitch, and then again in the next chain, slip stitch again, and single crochet in the last 6. And you can see that the bow is starting to form, and that is the first tail of the bow. Okay, so to sort of anchor it down in the middle, we're going to slip stitch into the center again, so right where everything else was being slip stitched. Pull that through, and now we're going to chain 9 again because we're going to be starting the other tail. Just the same exact way we did the other one, starting in the second chain, 2 slip stitches. So skip the first one, do 1 slip stitch, and then the next one, another slip stitch, and then 1 single crochet in the last 6 that are left on here. So we have our 2 tails, and again we're going to slip stitch in the middle. Alright, and then we're going to fasten off with a long tail. So I'm going to sort of bring my working yarn from the back to the middle where my hook is, and I'm going to do my fasten off with a very long tail, because you want to be able to wrap this around the bow a couple of times and be able to sew it on to the bracelet. So I just gave myself more than I needed. Okay, so there's my bow without the center, and you can see the difference on the finished one. We're just going to wrap it around the middle a couple of times. So just take it and literally just go around and in between the 2 tails like that. Let this little tail end from before stay in the back. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And flip it over on the back, and I'm going to use that little short tail and tie it with my end like that, and maybe one more time, and now we have the bow ready to sew on. Alright, next you want to decide which wrist you're going to wear this on. So I put it on my right wrist, and I have my button to the right when I'm facing the bow, because what I want is that when I put it on like this, for me, it's easier to connect this myself if I have the loop at the bottom and I sort of just grab the button and push this around it. So whatever way or side is more comfortable for you, just think about that when you go to sew this on, because I like the tails of the bow to be forward so that when people look at it, you know, they're seeing it the right way. Even though for me it's upside down, that just feels right to me. If you want to have it so the bow is this way, so that the bow is hanging like that on your wrist, you can do that too. So just, you know, plan that out before you decide where to put the bow. So I'm going to do it the same way I did the other one. My button over here, my loop there. I'm going to take my bow, find the center, just fold it in half like this, and I want my bow right here. And I'm just going to kind of open up that first layer of the curls so that I can stick my bow right in there like that. And I'm going to thread with my needle the long end that I had on the bow. And then I'm going to see where that is right in the bracelet. So right there will be the center where I want it. And then pull that through. Don't worry about this. We will sew that in to the back later. All right, so position that how you want it. And then just do as many stitches as you need to secure it. So I'm just going to go through the back a couple more times. Just pay attention to where you're coming up in the front and back down, because if you make your stitches too long, you will see it. So I'm going to try to keep this as short as possible. I came up right here. I'm going to go right back down right next to it. And I'm going to come up again on this side of the bow, just to keep it from, you know, maybe like turning. All right, so we're going to get rid of that tail end from before. Sew that through to the other side. So now that's gone. The front looks fine. We're going to flip it over. And I have these two ends. I'm going to knot them together. I'm going to do 3 knots. And then I'm going to weave in. I'm going to cut this shorter because we don't need all that. So I'll cut it about the same length as the other one. And then we can weave those ends in. All right, and then cut any extra tail end that's left. And it is finished. So now you can wear it, and now you can go to Christmas parties and like point to stuff obnoxiously just to show it off. If you make one and you share it on social media, please tag me, because I like to see people using my pattern, and I will share it online. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. I think that's pretty much it. And leave a like if you liked this video pattern. This is actually my first full video one, just so I can see if you guys want more of this type of content. So thanks for watching, and I hope if you have any questions, just leave it in the comments and I will get back to you.
People always ask, isn't it too much? But I'm like, it'll never be enough. Never. It'll never be enough. Like never ever is never enough, and it will never be enough.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?